Vintage lenses are fun. There's not really any other way to phrase it, right? You get this lens that captures something with character, and if you know where to look, you can find a bargain. Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Eli. I make videos about the Micro Four Thirds camera system and photography in general. Today I'm going to cover where to get vintage lenses, how to adapt them to your camera system, and just some things to look out for. While I'm going to be using a Micro Four Thirds system and making reference to it, pretty much everything I'm going to show you can be applied to any camera system. So let's jump in and I'll show you where you can get some vintage lenses. So the easy answer here, right, is just online. But I don't think you should just go to eBay or Gumtree or whatever and type in vintage lens. What works for me when I'm searching for old lenses is to type in a specific old lens mount. So I would recommend either the M42 mount, which is what this is, the OM mount, which is Olympus's old lens, or the FD system, which is Canon's old film mount. So if you search that, you're going to find like more specific lenses as opposed to someone that's just trying to sell you something that he found in his garage and thinks it's worth a lot because it's vintage, right? And you might even be better off looking for an old film camera as opposed to just buying a lens. So you're just going to instantly get put into a very expensive hobby, right? But I found this job lot on eBay and I didn't win it. I put a few bids in, but I didn't win it because I don't need it. While it's like broken film cameras, you get all these lenses and you could probably even fix up one or two of the cameras and get yourself into a very expensive hobby. And last place is like secondhand shops, charity shops, or thrift stores. That's where I picked up this lens. This is a Helios 44-2. It's a 58mm prime that goes to f2. It's very common. It was even used in filming the Batmobile scenes in the Batman movie with Robert Pattinson, so that's a pretty cool piece of trivia. Quite often in charity shops they get given all these old things and they don't really know what to do with them, so you might find an old camera with an old lens, or just even an old lens next to a camera it doesn't even fit on, and you get yourself a decent bargain. Okay, I shall set the scene. You ordered a lens off eBay, it's arrived. Now what do you do? If you look at this lens, this has a threaded mount on it and it's not going to fit on any camera I own short of holding it in front of the sensor, right? But how are you going to know that the lens you're looking at will fit on your camera? Well, let's talk about adapting the lens. So the easiest way I found is to go to Amazon and just search the system that you're trying to adapt to the system you're trying to adapt it to. So in my case, that was the M42 to Micro Four Thirds. Up came a bunch of adapters, so I knew it would work. Now, let's say that you got this lens and you don't know what the mount is. Well, then you have a few options. You can either post on camera forums. Another option is to use Google Lens on your phone, and it might not tell you, but it might take you to an eBay listing of this lens that says the system. Now, chances are, if you're shooting with a mirrorless system, particularly Sony because their sensor is quite far forward, or Micro Four Thirds because the sensor is small, most lenses are going to work. I would still err on the side of caution and see if an adapter is available on like Amazon or K&F Concept. They make a bunch of adapters, even AliExpress. So now the time comes to use the lens. This is my EM5 Mark II. I picked it up a while ago. We're still working on a full review for it, so expect that soon. And let's put this lens on it so I have something I can hold in my hand. So chances are you are going to be manually focusing. I'm not great at manually focusing because I grew up with autofocus on cameras. But most modern cameras have an option called focus peaking. And I'll get some B-roll of this, but what it means is when you focus, it's gonna guess what's in focus based on, I'm assuming, contrast or whatever. It's going to outline that with a color. So on my G9 that's red, and on my EM5 I can set that to be white, blue, or red, or whatever. Another thing, your camera might just not know what to do when you put this lens on. On some cameras I've heard that you have to turn on an option that's like close shutter without lens, because if there's no electronics in the lens, the camera doesn't know there's a lens on it. And now we're going to get on to field of view and focal length. So these terms kind of get misused a little bit. So this lens is 58mm, which means on the film camera it comes with, or a full frame camera it's adapted to, it will act as a 58mm prime with a field of view of that focal length. Now, when I adapt it to Micro Four Thirds, which has a 2x crop factor, it's going to act as if it has a frame of view of a 116mm. But in terms of compression, it's going to act like a 58mm. Imagine it's a 58mm lens, but I'm just cropping in, but I'm not cropping in. And then if you're adapting it to like an APS-C camera, so that's a 1.6x crop, so you're looking at about 93mm. But that's not the focal length, that's the frame of view, but it's essentially acting like that, but it's not getting the compression like that. Like on Micro Four Thirds, 2x crop factor, it's gonna act like 116mm, but it's not really, it's a 58mm with that frame of view. Yeah. So I had originally planned a section now where I go out and shoot with the lens, but so I'm just going to talk about my experiences now using a lens. I'm going to have a few of my images that I've taken with this lens up on the screen. This particular lens, the Helios 44-2, is kind of famous for its swirly bokeh. It's almost like I've gone in and added like a radial motion blur to the background, right? It's really cool. Now, because I'm on a cropped sensor, I'm cropping in on that image, so I'm not getting as much background. So it's kind of harder to get that effect, but I still get a bit of it, and I really like that. There's something about having to manually focus. I'm going to get really kind of like a pretentious film shooter right now, right? But like with modern burst modes and just quick autofocus, we can just like point and take a shot and be done with it instantly. There's not really much time to consider with the frame. But while manually focusing, I tend to notice faults with my composition more because it takes a long time for me to manually focus because I'm not that good at it. So then I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just actually move slightly this way, and then I can take another shot, and I just get more control, I think, over the final image from that. Maybe it's a bit of like, oh no, like we just have it too good with modern technology. No, I really love being able to autofocus really quickly or whatever. But there's something nice about it if you're just taking a simple shot to be able to do whatever and just take a while and manually focus. I have noticed, and I don't know whether it's because of like modern day lens coatings or just like that this is older glass made in the USSR, that it does respond to light weird, and that any image taken with it, even if you do a relatively modern edit, then it still has a bit of a vintagey look to it. And I think for this lens in particular, that's definitely the swirly bokeh, but it just handles light a bit differently and colors a bit differently, and it all kind of is this wish-wash of everything together that is quite an aesthetically pleasing thing. I think vintage lenses just look cool aesthetically on the camera as well. And I know that's really a daft thing, like if saying that it's better because it looks cooler, but if it makes you want to go out and use it more, then yeah, it is better than if it looks really boring and you don't want to go and use it. I find that particularly with this EM5, with it having the kind of silvery top and looking a bit like an older body, like an old film body, that I quite enjoy going out and shooting with this. Does it make me a bit of a pretentious hipster? Probably. Am I about 10 years too late to be a hipster? Absolutely. So I just finished filming all that, and then I look outside and it's actually a bit sunny. But I've recorded everything, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and film a photography vlog style thing with this lens at some point. So if that's something you're interested, then subscribe, you know? If anyone has any recommendations for like vintage lenses they think I should check out, or like any horror stories they've heard or anything like that, feel free to comment them down below. I'd be really interested to hear them. And if you like this kind of content, you know, subscribe. I'm going to try and upload videos weekly on photography and Micro Four Thirds and camera gear and all that sort of good stuff. So if that just sounds appealing, then let me know and subscribe. If you made it this far, cheers.